Hello, good evening, good afternoon, and I want to repeat a Happy New Year for everyone that is there listening and watching this program, wherever you are in the world, of course, because we have viewers from all over the world. So today we are speaking about something very important for the Judeo-Christian tradition, that is the Bible, and is the and is really the beginning of the Bible, so the book of Genesis. And we will have a Jewish perspective that, of course, is very important because we as Catholic share this book with the Jewish people, and of course they can also let us understand some intricacies on the text that are very relevant. So I'm very happy to be joined in this program by Professor Ronald Handel, that is a professor of hebraic and in the Bible, in the Old Testament, Ancient Testament, how we want to call it. And so thank you, Professor Handel, for your participation in this program.
My pleasure. Happy to be here. I wish I were in Rome.
I want to start really from the beginning. So we know that there are the first three words in the Bible that also give the name to our program, that indeed are so complicated because each one of them raise a lot of problems. And so I want to go through this problem with you, and starting to see the text of the first three words, Bereshit, bara, Elohim. And of course, we read from the right, as is the use. So the first word of the Bible is Bereshit. I don't know if I pronounce correctly. You will correct me, of course. So I want to ask you, this Bereshit refer to what? What is this beginning? What is in the Jewish mind, this beginning? The beginning of what?
Well, I would say it's the beginning of the book. That's a simple answer, but it's a book about beginnings, and this is the beginning of the book about beginnings. So it's as simple and as complicated as that. Whenever one starts a book, or whenever someone starts talking about beginnings, that raises important and complicated questions. The beginning of what? And what happened before the beginning? I would immediately call to mind something that the great church father Augustine once said, that there's a special region of hell reserved for people who ask questions like this about what happened before the beginning. There's a similar Jewish tradition in the Talmud saying that one should never ask questions about what is before and what is after and what is above and what is below. So my initial response is that these are questions you're not supposed to ask within traditional Judaism and Christianity.
But indeed, you know, of course, you quote Saint Augustine, and you may know that I share the name with Saint Augustine because my name is Aurelio, and also Saint Augustine was called Augustine Aurelius. So we have the same name. But I have to say, I'm not asking what happened before the beginning, but what is this in the beginning? Because some people say, but this is this Bereshit. I don't know. I pronounce correctly. You can tell me what. Yes, this is the real beginning, or is just a beginning, a possible beginning. I mean, this word denote the beginning of everything, or is just a general beginning?
Well, I'm going to have to get complicated to give you a thorough answer to that question.
Okay.
This has to do with some nuances of biblical Hebrew grammar. Okay, so I hope you've drunk your espresso to be able to follow this.
Don't worry, I am all ears.
Okay, so yeah, so let me say that this is a complicated grammatical issue, and it's also a literary stylistic issue, because the person who wrote this, we call this source the priestly source. This chapter is the masterpiece of the priestly source. And so this writer is using the grammar in a deliberately ambiguous and literary way. So the writer is playing with the grammar. So there's two ways that one can read the grammar of this first verse. One is in the beginning, when God created the heaven and earth, which makes it a temporal clause, a clause that refers to time. Okay, so in the beginning of the act of God creating heaven and earth. So that makes clear what it's the beginning of. It's at the point when God began to create the heaven and earth. So you can see it's the beginning of what happens next, in which case this sentence is a temporal clause saying when God began to create heaven and earth, this is the way the universe looked like. Okay, so that makes it clear that it's the beginning of the creation, but it's not really the beginning of the universe, because verse 2 tells you what the universe looked like already. And so in that case, what we're seeing is a kind of in media res. That is to say, we're starting in the middle already. We're starting when God began to do active acts of creation. But that prior to that point, there was a kind of durative or stative or static picture of the universe that, as a static state, was always already there. You see what I mean? And so the second sentence says the earth was formless and void, and darkness was over. Yeah, the earth was formless and void, and darkness was on the face of the waters, and the wind of God hovered over the waters. So the picture there in that grammatical construal, in that grammatical understanding, is that verse 2 gives you the durative picture of the way things always had been. That is to say, the first situation was a situation of a kind of dark, windy chaos. And that had always been. Okay, and so this is very similar to ancient Greek concepts, ancient Mesopotamian concepts, ancient Egyptian concepts. So this is part of what we would call the mythology of the ancient world. Okay, that there was chaos, and out of chaos, and chaos has a kind of timeless, durative, unchanging quality. In a sense, there is no time yet. Okay, everything is just a state. And then time, in a sense, begins with the first activity, and that first activity is God saying, "Let there be light."
So
now let me complicate that, though, because there's another way of understanding it, and that is to understand the grammar saying, "In the beginning, God created heaven and earth." In which case, we're talking about the very point of beginning. Okay, and at this point, God begins to create heaven and earth. And so verse 2 is a consequence of God creating heaven and earth. And before all this, there was nothing. So this is creatio ex nihilo, creation out of nothing. And this second meaning, this second construal of the grammar is the way it has traditionally been taken, both in Jewish tradition and Christian tradition. Okay, people like Augustine and the classical rabbis. But the first interpretation is probably the correct one. The first interpretation, where it's a temporal clause that when God began to create, this is what things look like. That's probably the original meaning of the passage.
And how what you say may intersect with the Big Bang of the science? There is any, for you, there is any point of contact between this interpretation of Bereshit and what the science say with the Big Bang theory of the creation?
Well, I would say if you follow the second interpretation, that this is the absolute beginning in Genesis 1, which, as I've already said, is probably incorrect. Okay? So if it's an absolute beginning, and then God said, let there be light, there's a kind of, pictorial similarity with the Big Bang, where you have these fluctuations of, I don't know what they are, quarks or something like that, and then all of a sudden something bangs, and that creates light and motion and matter and all sorts of things. So there's a kind of superficial, a kind of cinematic similarity. If there's nothing and then there's all of a sudden something, and that something is visually characterized by the creation of light. But as I said, that's probably the wrong interpretation of Genesis 1, in which case there's no similarity.
So may I ask, in the word of the Jewish scholar of whom you are part, what is the relationship between the scientific theories of creation and the biblical story of creation?
Well, I can't speak for Judaism as such, because, as you know, there are many views in Judaism.
Yes, of course.
I mean, if you get two Jews together, you'll have three different opinions. So
okay.
start with that. And secondly, the specifics of my interpretation are within the context of scholarship. So what I'm giving you is not really a traditional Jewish view at all. It's what modern scholars think, but I'm aware of how it relates to traditional Jewish views. So I would say, there are as many views within Judaism about the relationship between the Bible and science as there are in Catholicism. I would say that on the one hand, Genesis 1 is science, but it's science from antiquity. So this is one ancient Israelite scientific model of how the universe came to be. There are other models in the Bible as well. We see different views of creation. We see a different one in the Garden of Eden story in Genesis chapter 2. We see other versions in some of the Psalms, in the book of Job. So there are different models of the origin of the universe, as there were, let's say, in ancient Greece, where you had Hesiod, and then you have Thales, and you have Socrates, and you have all of these. So there are different models that are competing with each other. Okay, but they regarded them in the same way that we would regard science. That is to say, these are valid models, or at least the competition between them, there should be at least one of them that's true. So they're arguing in the same way that, modern scientists argue. Is the universe a solid state, or is it expanding, or is it contracting? So the stakes are very similar, but the categories in which they're arguing are categories from antiquity. So they're not really compatible with modern science in terms of the category.
To end with this word, to end talking about Bereshit, I want to ask you, maybe it would be clear more if you can offer some example of other context in which the word Bereshit would be used in the Bible.
Oh, okay. Yeah, just for the word Bereshit, there are references to in the book of Kings at the beginning of the kingship of so-and-so. So it's a temporal word, the beginning of the time of X. Or at the beginning when someone started to speak to somebody else.
Okay. And so we have Bereshit bera, so create. Now, you before you mentioned about creation ex nihilo, no, from nothing, and now there are some people that challenge this interpretation. They say that bara does not mean creation from nothing, but means something like shaping. So shaping from a material that is already existing. Now, of course, I'm sure you can give me a very deep answer about this kind of question. It is a creation. Bara means creation from nothing, or it means shaping from something that is already there.
Yeah, that's a good question. The meanings of words sometimes aren't really quite as fixed as that, and especially the meaning of verbs. What we can say is that bara is a word to create, okay? And the interesting thing about it, the unique thing about it, is that the subject of this verb is only God.
Okay.
So somehow it is a kind of creation that only God does.
So this word can be applied only to God.
Yes. So that's what makes it interesting.
Okay.
Later in the story, on different days of creation, it'll say God created something, and it uses the word bara, but then it also uses other words like the word asa, which means to make. Now, to make is just, to make. There's all sorts of ways you can make something, and God can make things, and people can make things, and animals can make things. So making is a much more general word. But this is more specific. Simply, it points to that this is God creating things.
Okay.
I don't think we can be more specific about. It's certainly not just creation ex nihilo, because as I've already said, that's probably an incorrect interpretation of the story. So it's just to create, but with a little asterisk that says God only. So, no trespassing by people here.
You mean that this verb cannot be applied to a man or a woman?
Right. Correct. So a man or a woman can make something, but only God can bara something. So
okay.
The specialness of it is simply that its agent is God.
Okay. So if you have to say a man create a poem, you would not use the word bara.
Exactly.
Okay. So just the fact that this is a word only used by God, it means that, because there are some people say, oh no, it's like and then we will go to this theory with the next word, but this one, it's God is just shaping, it's because you know very well, I'm sure, and especially you are in US, no, so you know that there are all these huge theories about what really was the Genesis saying. And of course, the main interpretation are, of course, the Christian, the Jewish, the biblical people, but there are also these other very fancy interpretation that indeed are also very successful. I mean, they sell a lot of books. For example, these theories of that we are created by the aliens, and so they read the Bible all with this kind of they call in English the ancient astronauts. I think it's called this like this, or paleoastronautic. I think is the name in English. That is very popular. I mean, also in Italy, you may know about a writer like Erich von Daniken, for example. Yes, you know that I know you are a scholar. Maybe you would you would disagree about his theories, but I can assure you that he sells millions of copies. So a lot of people rely on his own ideas, and they say no, because the Genesis talk about aliens, and so he's not saying that they create from nothing, but they shape, like the Eden was a sort of laboratory where they make experiment, creating. So, are you aware of all these kind of theories and interpretation? And do you think that there can be a challenge to the right understanding of what really is in the Bible for normal people?
Well, I would say the Bible is, the bestseller of all time. It's the
Yes,
most read book ever. And its legacy, its influence is everywhere. Even if
yeah,
you
of
don't
course.
realize it, the shadow of the Bible is everywhere, in politics, in literature, in art, and certainly in popular culture. So I would say you're talking about popular culture, and there's all sorts of wonderful and strange ways of appropriating the Bible to all sorts of what I would call kind of science fiction or conspiracy theories or things like that. But they're very entertaining. I would say they express interpretive desire. Okay, to have the Bible be relevant to what one is passionate about.
Yeah,
I,
what you say is very interesting, because I did several broadcasts about UFO and about paleoastronautics, because interest a lot of people this kind of topic, and I am I am always flabbergasted, you would say, how people is opposite opposed to believe in a God, but they believe very easily about that aliens came here, I don't know, 8,000 years ago, and then they stay here and they do things and they disappear, and they leave traces in the Bible. So you say correctly, they are interpretative traces of what people may want to believe. But why for you, people, a lot of people think that it's easier to believe like in the theory of alien or the instead than believing in that there is a transcendental God, and that he create. I mean, don't you think there is? He say something.
yeah. So I think it's a very interesting and important phenomenon. Let me just say, I think it's false.
Yeah, of
Okay, I
course.
think it's science fiction. It's not science. It's not an accurate reading of the Bible. But I would say there's a very nice short book by Carl Jung that he wrote about UFOs, and he calls them technological angels. And I think that's a very nice way to describe how people can read the Bible and say these are not angels, these are technological angels. That is to say, since people don't believe in angels anymore, but there's a kind of desire to have creatures that mediate between our simple mortal world and some higher metaphysical world. If you don't believe in angels, but you do believe in spaceships, and you do believe in, life on other planets, then in a sense, aliens can fill that same category and can fill that same need that in antiquity they filled with the category of angels. You see what I mean? So
Yeah,
I
yes.
think there's a continuity between these ancient categories of angels and other creatures that mediate between the mortal world and the higher world, and UFOs, which perform the same function. They mediate between our everyday world and some kind of higher world that we have a desire, a passion to believe in and to orient ourselves towards. So I think it's a very understandable phenomenon, and it just shows you in some ways how our psyches and our spiritual energies are very similar to what they were in biblical times, but our categories have changed their names a little bit and shifted a little bit.
Thank you. And before continuing with Professor Handel, I want to remind you that we are in YouTube, Ritorno a Itaca. We are in Twitter, Aurelio Porfiri account, and we are in my Facebook fan page, Aurelio Porfiri. And then if you want to be always updated on all the programs, video, articles, books, and everything I'm producing, go to Telegram and look for Aurelio Porfiri's channel, where you will find most of the update on my many activities. So, Professor, I want to continue in this line, because there is the word that these people question more, that is Elohim. And now they say, Elohim is not one God, but it's the plural of God. So it's gods. So this confirm these theories. Of course, we as Catholic, we of course give also the interpretation that is speaking about the Trinity, of course. But indeed, even I'm sure you now will say much better that I can say, in the Jewish scholarship, this use of the plural for the word God can be explained very well. But these people use this kind of topic, saying that this is the proof that there is not one God, but they call Elohim this group of people that come from from another planet, and they say, oh, there are many Elohim, there are various names, Yahweh was one of them, but there were many names, that is called. So can you explain why they say Elohim in plural form?
Yeah, well, these people are right that there is an interesting ambiguity in the word Elohim. So the singular word for God is El. Elohim is a particular plural form of El. And so grammatically, it ought to mean gods. Okay? So this is a very strange thing about the biblical lexicon about gods, is that it's essentially a monotheistic religion, but one of the words for God is grammatically plural. That's very strange. And so this gives rise to, as you say, the Christian interpretation traditionally is that this refers to the Trinity, which are three gods. And all sorts of other people can say, it refers to multiple gods. But
Trinity is not really three gods; it's one God in three persons.
Yeah. But
yes,
it's a unity in multiplicity.
Yes.
A unity in multiplicity, which
yes.
This is grammatically, it's formally, morphologically a plural noun, but it's used as a singular noun because the verb that goes along with this is a singular verb. Bera is a masculine singular verb.
Yeah.
And so Elohim must be a masculine singular God, or at least grammatically masculine. So yes. It is sort of unity and plurality somehow connected to each other. But let me say that there's another grammatical option, and that is a form that we call plural of intensification.
Yes, exactly.
And so this is something that's used every once in a while to show that something is a kind of superlative example or a more powerful example of that category. An example is behemoth or behemoth, which is a monster in the book of Job. And that's a plural form of the word for cattle or animal. So a behemoth is a singular, behemoth is in the plural, and it's the most powerful of all of the animals. And this is probably functioning the same sort of way, that this is the most powerful of all the gods. It's the intensification of the singular God. So it's
and
like
there are many attestations of this
like
in the
God
Bible.
Of gods.
There are many examples of this kind of use in the Bible.
There's not a lot. There's just
not a lot.
There's just a few, but it does exist. And it makes sense that this is some kind of plural of intensification. Another possibility that's, I think, the same functionally the same, is a plural of majesty. Sometimes the king, I know you don't have a king in Italy anymore, but you used to, the king would say we proclaim this and that and the other.
We call Plural of Majestatis.
Yes, okay, that's exactly it. So this could be that also, a plural of majesty, in which case it's just saying this is God, and God is a majestic God, and so we refer to him in the plural. So it's something like that, a plural of majesty or a plural of intensification.
Well, when you call it intensification, it's something similar, for example, to the Song of Songs, for example.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
So the same idea.
The same idea. So this is a category that exists in language. And when you use a plural noun like this with a singular verb, that indicates that it's a plural of intensification or a plural of majesty, something of that nature. But so it's not. It's kind of mysterious, but it's also kind of understandable. It's a category that language uses to express this kind of greatness of this.
So in Jewish scholarship, what is the most used interpretation?
I think the most used interpretation is this is just God. This is just the name of God, or one of the names of God. You know, there's many. But this is the only one that looks like
why there are many names? Can you explain?
Now that's a good question. Okay, these are good questions, because all of these questions are pointing to things that are difficult or complicated or ambiguous. Why would a God have different names? Sometimes a God has different names to emphasize different attributes of that God. Sometimes it refers to different locations. You'll have the Madonna of Guadalupe and the Madonna of Lourdes and that
Fatima,
sort of thing.
Yes, of course.
Sometimes, and I think this is probably more the case here, sometimes you have gods in some ways an amalgam of different older gods. Okay, and so some of the names can refer to this God who was originally different than this God, but they both were kind of melded together, or maybe 3 or 4 different gods were melded together, and so they kind of inherit the names of these different gods and fuse them together. I think that is the case for the difference between Elohim and Yahweh. The name El for a god is very old. We know that El was actually the high god of the old Canaanite pantheon before ancient Israel. So El was the great god, was the god par excellence, because his name means God. And he was the father of the other gods and the creator of earth and the creator of humans. I think that there's some indications that Yahweh was another God that existed in another place in the pre-Israelite world, and that somehow in ancient Israel, El fused with Yahweh, and they became a single God. And the main evidence for that is that there's these different names that are used for the same God. So there's a kind of trace of the history of God, in a sense, in these different names.
And I want to ask you, I know that among your several books, you publish also, I think, a comment and a translation of the first 11 chapters, I think, of Genesis, if I remember correctly. Yes. So I want to ask, at what level a Jewish scholar is rely on Christian scholarship on this subject? Do you rely at all on Christian? You mentioned many times the name of Saint Augustine, for example. No, so the fathers of the church, of course, have to be very well present to you. No, but I want to know modern biblical scholarship. There is some kind of collaboration between. Yes.
Yeah. So the main difference is between, I would say, pre-modern biblical scholarship and modern biblical scholarship. in modern biblical scholarship, Jews and Christians and atheists all work together because we share the same kind of interpretive goals and interpretive desires. And, to some extent, we kind of bracket our individual convictions so that we can work on this stuff in a kind of scientific way together. So, for example, I have a number of close friends and colleagues at the Pontifical Biblical Institute in Rome.
Yes.
And I work with them and I write books and articles with them and things of that nature. So there's no, among the people who are really doing creative scholarship, there's no barrier between Jews and Christians and atheists and, in theory, Muslims. In some of my work where I talk about the history of the interpretation of the Bible, Muslim interpretation is very important because they're also interpreting the Bible in, the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th centuries AD. And sometimes they're a source of Jewish traditions that we don't have from Jewish writings. So the Jewish, Christian, and Muslim, they're all part of this world of interpreting the Bible. And if you share the kind of modern scientific approach, there's no theological difference.
And for our viewers, of course, in this meeting, I hope we can meet again to discuss other parts of the Bible, because I think this is very interesting. But I want to ask you if you have to suggest, for example, one or two books that can help people to have a good understanding about the Genesis and how it is the literary meaning. So what book you would suggest?
Well, at the risk of being self-promoting, one of my books is written for a general audience. It's called The Book of Genesis, a Biography. And it's actually been translated into Italian.
Okay. So maybe I can find it immediately, so that we can suggest to our audience your book. So it's let me find it immediately, so that for our Italian audience, yes, it's here now.
Il libro di Genesi.
Sì, il libro della Genesi.
Yeah.
Let me show the screen so that all the people can see what I am looking, and they can. Yes, it's here. So the Book of Genesis, a biography. This is the English edition, and then you can see in Italian is called Il libro della Genesi, published by Il Mulino, that is a publishing house in Bologna. And so if you want, you can read it in English or in Italian for our Italian audiences. And for the English version is also available, the ebook version, but I can see there is not for the Italian, but in any case you can find the paperback version.
But my other books are not written for a generalist audience, so really that's the only book of mine that people can read. But I would also recommend there's a lovely translation and commentary on Genesis by my colleague at Berkeley, Robert Alter, in English. And he has a very nice commentary at the bottom of the page that points out literary aspects of the text. And so it helps you to do a kind of fine-grained literary understanding. Let me make one more point about these three words we've been talking about from a literary point of view.
Yes.
Bereshit, bara, Elohim are the three words we've been talking about. And I want to say that the first two of these words are doing a wonderful wordplay with each other. Bereshit starts with the letters bera, bet, resh, aleph, bere. The second word is bara. Okay, the same letters in the same order and the same sounds. So there's a sound play that's going on when God creates. In the beginning, God creates Bereshit bara Elohim. There's a sound play here, and I think this is a beautiful kind of density of sounds that illustrates the sense that there's an organic, a kind of poetic quality of this opening of creation and of the act of God creating. And so I think that literary, that the words are a literary vehicle to give you a sense, a feeling of the organic nature of this beginning, that it flows beautifully in terms of the meaning and the sound. So it's almost like poetry.
Yes, and of course the poetic quality of course is very important to understand also the Bible. So Professor Handel, thank you very much for your time. I think it was quite interesting for all the people that are following our platforms, and I really hope we can have another meeting and talk again about these topics, because I think they are really fascinating, and I think that you never end to talk and to exhaust all the possible meanings that come from these great messages that come from the Bible. So thank you really for your participation.
My pleasure. It's been a pleasure. You ask very good questions, and Happy New Year to you and to the audience.
Thank you very much. So thank you for our audience, and if you want to follow us, please go to Telegram, and so you will be updated about the next programs. If you want to see our previous programs, go to the networks that I told you before, our YouTube channel, and where there are all the previous videos. So thank you very much, and bye bye.